So welcome to the Node.js package maintenance team meeting for January 14th, 2020. Welcome to the new year. We're going to follow the agenda as per the issue in the GitHub repo. And we'll start out with asking if anybody has any news or announcements that they'd like to share before we get started.
Michael, there's some work that's been going on with Citium and testing for module dependence. It's not on the agenda, but would it be okay to add it to the end if we get time to get to it?
Absolutely. Let me just add that in there. So this is Citium module dependencies. Anything else like that that people would like to add to the agenda? No? Okay, so let's launch into the agenda itself. The first one, actually, maybe I'm going to suggest we skip to 268 since I think that one will be quick, which is the Collab Summit topic. I think we can just close that unless there's something that we still need to do on that front. Okay, I'm just going to close it then. That's good. Okay, so just putting a comment in there, closing, clean that up. The next one then is 2FA and CI, which is 282. There are a few comments in there. So I think it's worth mentioning that Dominicus mentioned that there was a new sort of solution published in terms of two-factor authentication, which looks kind of interesting. We're still waiting to hear from NPM in terms of what their proposal is going to look like. I don't know if there's anything else specific to talk about on this one.
I thought they talked about what their proposal was going to look like. They just haven't committed to a ship date.
Okay, do we have a link in here in terms of where that is?
I don't remember where I saw it, but the gist that I recall is that you'll be able to essentially do a staged publish where without two-factor, you can, from CI, let's say, create like a, essentially you can npm publish -staged or something. And then later, anyone who has two-factor can review the staged publishes and select one of them to promote. And that will discard all the other ones for that version.
Right. I think that matches my understanding. I think we were just looking for there to be an actual, what is it NPM calls it, like an RFC?
Oh.
Because I think that's how, like, until they've got their RFC, that's not really sort of finalized what it's going to look like, or
the RFCs are, I think, only for their open source stuff, and this requires a registry thing. So I'm not entirely sure this fits under the RFC.
Right, that's my process as well.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood. I sort of thought from Darcy that there was going to be an RFC for it, where people could, comment and that's the way we'd actually get a, the next level of detail as to what it was. But.
I mean, it's possible that NPM will make that RFC once they have made sufficient progress on the registry side. I don't know. But I assume they would invite comment on the usability and the API and stuff. But we haven't heard anything from them yet. But that's what I described as my understanding of what they're likely to ship.
Yeah, no, and I agree. That's what we've heard. I was just thinking that there was, my understanding there's going to be something more concrete. I'd assumed it was an RFC that would say what it's going to be. So maybe I'll just ping Darcy to confirm that. We can add that into the issue.
Yeah, maybe we could also ask them to do, if not an RFC process, something like a intent to implement for registry side things. Because I think, some of these things cross the boundary between the CLI and registry, and I feel like it's a little unfortunate that we don't have more insight on what they're intending to do on the registry parts of these.
Right, and and my understanding kind of was that at least from talking to Darcy, was that they were planning to do that in a way where we'd see that detail. So I think I can follow up with him just to say, okay, if it's not an RFC, what will it be, and or clarify what the plans are in terms of that.
Definitely. So I don't know if you all saw, but I posted a link. So this is an effort that Google is doing. So Ben Coe is, and I think Ben and Ryan, and maybe it's Ryan's project, Ryan Day. But basically, it definitely should solve, whether or not people like the implementation details and whatnot, this problem for at least open source, GitHub projects. So if you read through it, it's kind of like a release manager kind of thing where it has multi-factor authentication built in via not NPM permissions, but via GitHub permissions. So you have to have like a release tagged with the same version number, and then have commit access on the repo, and then it will do the two-factor stuff.
My understanding though is that you also have to host it yourself as a service in which to store the NPM credentials. So like it's great for to me that means it's not great for open source. It's great for enterprise, or it's great for like a collection of open source that has lots of resources, like the foundation or something. But
well, I guess, yeah, where I was thinking great for open source meant coupled to GitHub, and if we had somebody to run it that we could all use. So I didn't necessarily, I agree with you. I would love infrastructure lists, which we don't have.
Yeah, if there was a way to like log in with GitHub and securely authenticate it with NPM or something, that'd be great. But if we had that, like NPM would still have to offer the NPM part. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. It's another option. Don't think that, if there was no option from getting something from NPM, it might be something that we might look at in terms of like, hey, is this the best we can recommend? But given that there might be something from NPM, it's still interesting to see what comes out of that. Not having to run a service at all would make it a bit easier on people. So I'm just gonna update
Michael.
the notes. Go ahead.
Sorry, just excuse me. Hi, my name is Owen. I did see a comment from Isaacs in the GitHub issue, and he did say he would open an RFC for that. So that was in November. I didn't see any other link tickets past that. I posted a link to his comment in the chat window if anybody wants to check that out.
Grab that. So I'm going to grab that, paste that into the notes, and just say that Owen, sorry, just trying to do that. Owen pointed this out.
Yeah, he did say that, which is really interesting. Maybe there was some miscommunication on their intent with the RFC process, but there hasn't been an RFC open because I follow that repo and I'm on the page right now.
I suspect they've just been really busy trying to get NPM 7 stuff out of the way and a few other things.
And it was the whole holiday season, right? So it's not surprising, but it would be good in the new year to kind of figure out when roughly there might be something. Okay. Sorry, I'm just updating the notes now. From Google as another option. Okay, so I'm just pasting in also the link to that to the minute, so we have that there. Okay, anything else on this topic we think we should talk about this week? Sounds like not. Okay, so the next one on the agenda is document the current top 10 Express issues. I'm not sure, Wes, if you exactly want to cover that, but I think it would be a good time to kind of cover what went on at the Collaborator Summit / conference and sort of progress there in terms of, getting the triage stuff going and then whatever else you think is good.
Yeah, for sure. So the triage thing, we've at least a few active people have started to to use their triage role. We haven't merged the PR which actually has the full documentation. I took a pass at editing it and then ended up doing a whole bunch of other things and never finishing the last edits. So I'm hoping to maybe do that this weekend and get that merged up, which maybe we then, if this group could take a look at what we have there and give feedback, if there's a way we can turn that into a document that we could then promote to other groups, that would be great, because so far it's been working out well. I think just having the couple people there to ping the authors of PRs or original reporters of issues has gotten a lot more engagement from them. Oftentimes it's just closing the issue or whatever, but still that's super helpful. And yeah, so that's going well. I do think I would love it if somebody could pitch in on the PKJS status board at some point, because I've been slacking. I haven't been slacking. I've been too busy to finish working on that. And right now the list in the Express status board is actually out of date because it was taking too long to index everything. So it needs to we need to either do partial indexes or something so that it doesn't time out the GitHub action. I can manually rerun it, but I've been busy with other things and haven't had a chance to. So there are new issues that have been tagged that aren't showing up in that list. But that, again, like I said, is just a matter of we can manually rerun it locally and then push the changes to the page. But really what needs to happen is the status board code base needs to be updated so that if it times out, it gracefully can pick up again or something like that.
I'm wondering, Bethany and Andrew, if that's something you could maybe, how much work do you think it is, Wes? Is it something that's a couple days work, or?
I think there's a few different approaches we could take. Some of them could be really easy, but whether they fully solve the problem or not, I'm not sure. The general thing is that when it times out, you just you don't right now, because of it's not keeping track of it. It doesn't know when it was each item or repo was last indexed. So I think one really simple thing would just be on success, save that off so that when you next load up, you can just sort by the oldest last indexed and start there. And I think that would probably be a couple hours work, maybe less. But that's maybe not the most robust solution. I think there's probably other ones. So I think we'd probably want to discuss maybe in that repo and then before we implement. But yeah, it could be pretty quick.
Okay.
So if there's somebody who wants to help out, that'd be great.
Maybe I'll talk to Bethany and Andrew offline to see if we can, if it's a couple hours and it keeps the Express data for the triagers up to date, that seems pretty important to me. So.
Yep.
In terms
but other
of
than that, I don't think there's much else really. Oh, well, okay. I guess I should quickly mention, one of the outcomes of the Collab Summit was starting out a web server framework team. One of the discussions we had as we were, saying, let's put this together is, can we just get Express 5 complete and out the door? So the top issues there, I redocumented the last couple things that need to happen before Express 5 goes out. If anybody is interested in helping, it's just a couple of things. I did have one person reach out to me specifically. I haven't heard back if they've made progress on the PR. But if you're interested, ping me and I can send you in the direction of a high priority. So this isn't the good first issue style things. These would be you want to spend maybe a day or two working on something to help push Express 5 over the finish line. So if you're interested in those, we have a couple there left to do. So.
Okay. And I think it would be good to capture here. So how many people were actually onboarded and are now officially triagers?
Oh yeah, let me go pull that list really quick. I was actually thinking about, I'm going to integrate the team updater script that Node uses into Express for that. I just haven't done it yet. So let me just do a quick lookup.
I just think that's good data for the team to see, and anybody who's watching is probably interested too.
Yeah, definitely. So we have 10 triagers now.
Okay, excellent.
Yep.
10 people added as triagers, and you said, how many would you say have been fairly active so far?
I think I've seen activity out of 4. I would have to, it's hard to
Sure.
say. Also, there's a few repos that I don't watch just because I'm not actively looking to work in there. So they could be triaging in those as well.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just rough numbers. That's good enough. I think I'm just. Okay, and then you've got the other piece on that. Any other major? There's the PR to update the triage process, which you already talked about. We've got people engaged. Anything else really as a major next step other than to see how it works out?
No, there is discussion on whether or not. So we have a new governance doc PR that I opened, which will be for the OpenJS application, and I guess we should. There was some discussion on whether or not the triager description and role in the org should be added as part of the governance. Again, I don't know if that's something that anybody has opinions on or wants to help figure out, but that's, I think, the only other remaining triage discussion before that gets merged.
I'm just thinking like the analog to node.js. I think that like the places where like in our governance or related documents that might impinge on that is that's where we define who and how people get access. So it's like, collaborator, the governance says like collaborators are the people with the access to the repo, and here's how you become a collaborator, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of sounds like triagers are a similar thing in that you get some level of access to the repo, not the same as a collaborator. So it might fit from that perspective.
Okay.
Right. Like if you want to have the governance say who gets access, it's like, okay, that's part of what you're now giving out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, maybe I should just make that change. The problem is we have like a bunch of things in motion, and since actively right now I'm the only one committing to them, they're I don't want to put too many roadblocks in front of merging them. I'd rather merge an incomplete thing and then get the next step.
Absolutely. Later, like I don't think it's critical, or like if it shouldn't be a blocker. Like if it's landed somewhere else, that's fine. I was just giving you it could make sense, but
yeah,
I don't think it's critical to whether you do it at the beginning or not. It's like get stuff in and then incrementally go in that direction is perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like that's well underway, which is good. And I did write in the minutes I volunteered you to do at some point, but like Wes to open an issue in package maintenance repo to see how we recommend document this for other projects. So you don't have to do it all, but like just an issue to remind us that, hey, we should at some point look at what we're doing. How do we capture that? And like, Jarish or some of the other people involved in the triage can hopefully help do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that'd be great. So I'll open that issue maybe later today.
Okay.
Just to start the discussion.
And if I recap a little bit on the top 10 Express issues, you really the place that would help the most today beyond the triage is helping with those issues you've now set as the Express 5 out of getting.
Yeah,
Express
maybe let
5.
me grab the link for that so that we don't have to
okay.
look. Yeah.
And here I can actually share that maybe. If you post it in, I'll put it in the minutes and we can share it too.
Yep, I'm going to it right now. Okay, there it is.
Thank you. So there we go. Into the minutes. And then I will just quickly open it. And let's just share that. If I can find the right one now. Release 5 by Doug Wilson, right? Okay. So is this the one, like I'm just looking, okay, I come here, I want to know what to do. So it's these 5 things, or these are the, It's a real to-do list. So it's consider disabling extended query. Sorry. Consider disabling extended query string parsing by default. Move recres prototype extension to separate repo. Status undefined, but okay. So it's this specifically, like look at those 5 and help move those forward. Wes, that you're on mute if you're talking.
Sorry. Yeah, I was muted and I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's those 5 and so number 1 and 3 are the easiest to tackle. I think both of those PRs just need a little cleanup and maybe some docs, or I think maybe a test in one of them. So like most of the implementation's already done.
Okay.
The router is the thing that I tackled last weekend prepping for. We're still having a couple of discussions over there just to get that finished. And number 2, I did the one half of it, then there's another half that would have to be done. And that's where I say that one's maybe that'd be at least a day's worth of work for somebody if they wanted to tackle that.
Okay. So no, that's good. I just wanted to.
Short list.
It seems pretty concrete, and it's a pretty short list. Okay, yep. If we should see, it's pretty clear if people want to help get that out, what to do. So.
Also, feel free to go and throw that a thumbs up, because nobody's commented after I made it, and I'd like to get some momentum there and make it clear. Oh, can you not thumbs up if it's locked? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
It was locked because it's been such a long-running thing, and there's been hundreds of people just coming in there saying, "Is this alive or not?" which is totally unhelpful. But that's unfortunate.
I mean, I don't know if you basically took that and put it like getting Express 5 over the line or something and opened a new issue that had that in it. I don't know if that's
yeah, maybe I'll consider doing that. But the thumbs up aren't super valuable, other than like it would be nice for not just the collaborators to be able to see that people want this.
I guess social media opportunities to be like, hey, help get Express out the door, and throw it up on Twitter or anything like that.
That would be
Slack
great. So I think I did post about it and tweet about it, but I don't think it got a ton of this isn't the kind of thing that goes viral. I need to figure out some way to make it into a shit post or something, and then people, it will get passed around. But
can you
need to figure out how to put it in a meme?
Yeah.
Can you paste the links to those? Like, I'm happy to retweet that, and we can probably get other people to retweet it. And
sure. I also have a issue I created a Twitter handle that I'm hoping to make the official Express Twitter. So maybe this could be its first tweet.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we follow that, and
okay, I'll get links to that,
because it's kind of like we're happy. I think people will be happy to try and amplify it as well. But that's a great way if there's something to follow. But sometimes just reminding people like, hey, these are the key things versus you showed up in your stream and you missed it, kind of thing.
Oh, it looks like this account is temporarily restricted. Twitter must have not liked the fact that I registered it and didn't use it. But I'll post the link to the. Let me get back. There we go. So this is the Twitter account I registered. So go ahead and give that a follow. Can you follow without it being? I've got too many things on my plate, so I've been skipping back and forth between things, and I didn't complete any of it. So I'd like to get this Twitter thing sorted out. So I'll add this to my to-do list, and since you can't follow it yet, maybe sending the link isn't super valuable. So I'll have to go through and figure out why it restricted it, and then I'll get a tweet up there.
You can follow it. You just have to press it basically warns you not to.
Oh, okay.
or something like there's a warning that would make you think, oh, should I do this? And I said yes anyway, and then it let me follow it. But okay.
So I'll start using that to promote these things as well. So
okay, that sounds good. please. Going to promote through. I'm just putting this in the minutes too. Okay.
Oh, you know what? Let me add one other thing onto this since we're still on the Express topic. Can people take a look at this discussion? So I want to add a new thing. So this would be like we'd have triagers, the TC members, and then this would be sort of a maybe intermediary role. So it'd be this captains for the different projects. We have this in practice, but not codified anywhere. I'd like to get people's opinions on this and then get people who care to try to, work up toward being captains of the different repos. And I think this would be possibly another thing that we could add to the list of recommended project structures or something in the future, if people like the idea.
Right, so that's issue number 98, right?
On the Express discussions repo, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually copy and paste that so I can bring it up. Okay. Somehow. Nope. Okay, I'm just having finger problem.
Wes, so is this maybe an opportunity as like a springboard for some of these high impact projects to have like a governance model to follow? Because like for Express, when it gets really big, you have so many repos, being able to kind of add owners, code owners in a sense to, scale that out. I'm not sure how big Express is to other impact projects, but or if they have the same.
Yeah, I think that would be well. So yeah, there was a few things I think you said there. So I think this as a model, I think, is interesting for projects which are structured like Express, where there's an umbrella org that has a governance, but then each individual repo really is its own domain. And I think that for Express, this is trying to make that explicit in the governance, but then for the greater impact of what the package maintenance working group works to promote to other big ecosystems of packages, I think this could be another, guideline or recommendation or something, if it works.
Like a pattern that you could follow in terms of how do you add roles for people to step into, and so.
Because
go ahead.
Because I've just observed one that really comes to mind is Webpack, which just has an enormous ad hoc community. And I noticed a while ago, I'm not sure if it was after joining the JS Foundation. Again, this could just be an example, but I noticed that I think for really critical plugins and packages, they created the Webpack contribs org. Of course, that I think entailed some sort of ownership change. But yeah, I guess in terms of just seeing what other prior art there is out there, different models of our architectures might require different governance models, but Express, Webpack, I'm sure there's other big ecosystem-like projects that either have their own ideas or could benefit from the experience of other projects in similar situations.
I absolutely agree, and I would love to see the prior art on that. If you have any good links, definitely I would like to read through those and see if there's, again, and this is where the package maintenance working group I think is really well situated to try to bring all of that together, so that maybe we could give a list of if you're trying to set up your project governance, here's models that have worked for other things. Here's some resources to go read. I think that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I just commented that. I mean, I think it's in line with what some other projects have done as well, like as Owen mentioned in terms of code owners and actually having it formalized or documented is a good thing so that people see, okay, I don't have to go, I'm not, it's something like an intermediate step towards the TC, or it's a place where I can say, oh, I'm going to pick off a smaller project, understand that, and take some responsibility, which is definitely good.
I guess just real quickly, so like this, like the issue that you have here, Wes, is there anything similar in terms of an issue for governance and package maintenance? Would we maybe want to either use this as a spike and or an example and see how it works here, or start an issue in package maintenance about governance, or maybe is it all a little premature?
Well, I think so. I think the role of our package maintenance working group is more to take the different things from the community and pull them together to make it easier for future or new groups looking to pick their model. In this it would be for governance. So I don't think we would apply this to the package maintenance group. More, we would just maybe make a blog post and say, here are some governance models. If you're setting this up, we might not need to do it alone. Here's some examples. Because again, like I wrote this, so I spent my time writing this thing. It'd be much better if we had a thing that was just like, oh, copy and paste this from the package maintenance working group who keeps it up to date and with best practices we've learned, so that it makes it easier on the next group.
Yep.
Right.
I guess you see where I'm saying there's two parts here. Like this is the express part, and I'm just bringing this up so that we could say maybe there's some learnings we could abstract out, toward the rest of the community.
Well, I guess your comment about prior art, I guess, would anybody be opposed to a issue in package maintenance, bring up the discussion of governance model, where maybe someone could do some research, look at Webpack, look at Express, look at others, and then just basically what I'm saying is, would it be okay if I did that and we could start drafting that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're volunteering, and that sounds great. In terms of this specifically, it would have been like, we probably need to vet it a little bit more on the Express side before we would pull it back and say, hey, this is what we recommend. But what you just described is a very good thing to say, okay, can we go out and look at any of the others? And if you've got the cycles, yeah, I think that's a great, very much +1.
Cool. I'll get it started. Like I said, it might take a while to mature it into something that the working group can adopt. But as we have these conversations, if we have these things, we want to put that information somewhere, we'll have a central place as it comes up. And then at some point we'll, get to a point where we have something useful over time. Okay.
And I think it would be very valuable for this group. If you come back and say, here's the research I did, this is what these different projects are doing, us just understanding that is a significant benefit on its own. So that's a great first step, and hopefully it leads to the other steps, but even without that, super useful.
Just one last question while we're here, not to necessarily play favorites or anything, but I guess, would it be an appropriate step to use, like, I guess, OpenJSF projects as a place to start? I imagine those are some of the biggest projects. So if anybody has anything established, it would be a good place to start, or in terms of a sample size, I guess.
So we have some work that's already sort of been done toward that question. If you take a look in the issues, maybe I can find the specific issue. We had outlined way early on in this process of setting this group up a 3-stage process for how we would roll things out. And it was like pilot packages, high impact packages, and then general access or open enrollment. Yeah, so it's 142, 143, and 144 issues. And so the idea was like Express and MQTT are the pilot. I think those are the only two, right?
I think so, yeah.
Pilot packages, which we haven't really done a lot with MQTT yet. But then the high impact packages, which is I think what you're talking about, which would probably be, I think we'd want to source the OpenJS Foundation packages for that stage. Obviously that was opened in January of 2019. So 1 year ago, we set this plan. And I think we still kind of are considering ourselves in the pilot phase. But I think it'd be reasonable to start maybe doing the high impact stage stuff as well. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but
Yeah, issue number 123. I'm just trying to get the links to.
Oh no, I said sorry. 142, 143, and
142.
144
Okay.
were the 3 issues that were opened for the
Right. Yes.
how we interface the group with
Okay.
the packages in the ecosystem.
Let me
stuff.
just quickly share that. So yeah, so we have this guy. So I think it would be, I think part of your point is we should probably include MQTT in that list, Owen, just because we did say that was going to be our second pilot. And so, you know, understanding the governance on that front is probably a good thing. And then 143. IMPEC packages, right. And I guess it was this would be the other, we didn't generate this list yet, did we?
No.
Okay,
No,
so this would be
definitely
like another thing that might direct toward the ones that we're more interested in. And then I think it's also fair to say, you know, we are part of the OpenJS Foundation, so that's another qualifier for what we think would be interesting in that initial set.
Cool. Yeah, this is a lot to run with. So I'll start digesting that and yeah, start putting some thoughts together. And if I have something good, I'll at least open an issue, and you know we can take it from there.
Sounds great.
Yeah, definitely. And don't hesitate to open up issues just to say, hey, this seems like an interesting idea to me. You know, it's not noise. It's good conversations. You know, if there is prior work already done on it, we'll all chime in with links and stuff. So, you know, an issue can always be closed. Not, don't set it too high of a bar. So.
And also the description can always be updated over time. So.
Yep.
Good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, no, that's great. Okay, so on the Express front, anything more, Wes, you think we should cover? It's been a good discussion.
Yeah, quite a bit. So I'm happy we can move on.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is next steps on support levels and package.json. So I think on that front, we've basically got agreement on what we want to promote. I think if I remember correctly, and people correct me if I'm wrong, one of the key next steps was to update the tool in PKGS to, you know, reflect what we finally decided and support kind of our recommended usage. And then after that, we were going to start the evangelization process. Is that what people remember?
It's been a while. And I'm the last person who commented, apparently. Yeah, it does look like that. This is about right.
Okay, so we basically.
I feel like though, isn't there some? Don't we still need? Because it doesn't look like we really address like what are the changes after having added the funding field that we need to make to it. Did we address that? Because right, isn't the idea that we now would, instead of listing the funding URL, we would actually reference the funding URL?
I don't remember if we've had any specific discussions on that front. I was kind of like, just in my maybe less thought out mind, was thinking that there'd be something that could coexist. The funding URL being kind of like a very much more specific thing.
Jordan, I feel like you were involved in that discussion, or maybe leading that discussion. Does that sound familiar?
Sorry, I missed the first context before you were talking about the funding field.
Okay. So this is the next steps on the support levels in package.json. And I thought one of the things that came up before we moved forward to get with this was to at least make some edits around referencing the funding URL as opposed to having it in the spec.
Yeah, so the current funding field, it supports, there's like a string shorthand or an array, or no, sorry, the string shorthand or an object. And the string one is just a URL. The object can have a type field or a URL field. The type field is kind of unused. It gets displayed, but like, I'm not even sure if it's that useful. So like, what probably is needed is some package that encapsulates, like, given this funding field value, what is the inferred type of it? Kind of normalizing all the data. I have an open RFC with NPM that I'm hopefully going to get merged in the next week or two to allow it to be an array of funding field values, so you can have more than one. But that doesn't affect what I just said before. As it relates to the support stuff, given that there's not like a unique ID or anything to the funding methods, there's not really a clear way or any path to it to uniquely reference a funding method from the support field. So you could reference a URL, or you could just say, see the funding field. The alternative, however, since these objects, I think, can be anything, what we could do is have an ID in the support thing, in like in whatever we want to attach a piece of funding information to. We could have an ID there, and we could put the support ID in the funding field object. And that way, kind of, it's like inverse. It's probably not ideal, but it still allows a unique link to be created. You could have like a funding field object could have like support items or something, and it's an array, and it can take any number, and then that would have all the IDs. And that way, once you found the support item you wanted, you would then go quickly scrape the funding field and pick out the ones that applied. So that's the only way I can see it really working. But I don't see any obstacles to making that happen.
So I guess it's like, in terms of moving forward with starting to recommend what we have in the support structure, is it that you think it's coming down to what do we need to change there? Not necessarily what do we need to change in the funding field, what do we need to change there before we'd want to push that forward? One thought that just came to mind was, we've got defined types, right? Could we make a new type the NPM funding? So basically, if you want to use the NPM funding field, you basically can still use the support info, and you can reference that by saying, well, actually, it's this type, and that means that it's wherever the NPM funding goes into.
I mean, I don't think we want to create a scenario where there's more than one possible source of truth. So given that NPM shipped the funding field, I feel like we should choose to let that tie our hands and say that is the only place funding information can ever go.
I agree with that. That said, it's making this quite a bit more complicated.
Right. Okay. So you'd be advocating for pulling funding out of that.
Yeah, like that's what I was saying, is we would, my recommendation would be to get rid of all funding information in the support field stuff, except make sure that each like support item that would otherwise have contained funding information has a unique identifier added to it somehow, an object key, for example, instead of an array of support items. And then that unique identifier, we can come up with a extension to the funding field that can point back to that support identifier. And then we've achieved the same linkages of information. It's just a slightly different schema. Does that make sense?
So basically, to remove so it wouldn't remove the support piece.
No,
it's just remove the funding aspect of that.
Yeah, it would just decouple, and using database normal form language, it would like normalize the funding information and the support information to different places. But we could still make it such that they're linked, because the funding field objects can be extended with any keys we want.
Okay, so let me just, where is that doc then? Sorry, I just want to pull it up.
So to make this more specific for the spec we have today, the idea would be that a backing field would have a key and a value which would point to a funding field. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry. So when you say backing field, you mean like if I put it under the support field in package.json?
So as the spec we have it now, there is the path would be support dot versions, then indexed, because that's an array, And then in that object, there's a field called backing, which
Yep.
is an object with a key value where key is, again, similar to the funding field where it's just an arbitrary name, and the right side is the URL. So the idea is instead of a URL, we would put a reference to a funding entity, which, we figured out
exactly
how to reference.
Right. And we could, I mean, however we want to design that right-hand side that you just described, the simplest could be, sure, a string that must be a unique identifier, or actually doesn't even have to be, just an identifier string that if you use that value and look through the funding field, any funding objects that have that string in an ID field or supports field or something are then linked to that backing item. Yeah.
Right.
We'll
But now
work out the details, obviously, but it seems entirely doable to link those together with any one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one type of relationships we want to ensure.
Right. So it's because we have different types here. We have like none, hobby, bounty, project, foundation, company. Like, do we see that funding field being extended to cover like, all of these options? So like the package maintained support by a corporate entity? Or
Yeah,
is it
I would assume that any of these types, these identifiers for which a funding source applies, could optionally have a funding ID attached to it, or multiple, right? So like, for example, you might have it set up as company, and maybe, or sorry, you might have it set up as project, and that would have both that could have an open collective and also a GitHub sponsor org. And then you might have it under hobby, and then that has a GitHub sponsor individual as well as a Tidelift link, which qualifies for most of my packages. So like, basically just any of them should be able to optionally have 0 to N funding IDs that point to something in the funding field.
Well, that can, or are URLs.
Yeah,
right?
or are
Because if it
URLs.
was company backed, you'd put the link to the company's website or information about that.
But
backing.
I mean, so that's a bike shed I think we can have separately. I mean, another option is to force that to then be in the funding field if that's what you want. But like, we can talk about that separately. But you're right, that's an entirely viable alternative.
right? So I just want to kind of understand. So we're at the highest level, the backing field would still exist.
Yeah,
And
the only
so
information that wouldn't be in it is the source of truth for funding sources. That would ideally move to be contained within the funding field and referenced instead.
Right. So like these links, I think like if we look at what I'm sharing here, we can say it's sponsored and then we have links, right?
Right. And so instead, my idea or my vision for it, which of course doesn't have to be the final outcome, would be that instead of any of those links, they would be 3 different references to funding field items that are those links.
This references to the funding field, right? So I mean, I think that was kind of where I was going. Like if we had an option to make, instead of this string, you could have a reference to the funding field.
Mm-hmm.
And so where it makes sense to, like, if it's a company and you want to actually put the URL for your, your company website, you could still do that. But if you actually want to make it something that can be specified through the NPM funding field, you would use an ID that references that other entry.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and by the time those changes go in, you'll be able to do multiple items in a funding field, and so that will fit in neatly.
Okay, so this sort of becomes an array. So it still says you could say sponsored, and it's an array of things which can either be, what we have today, which is URL, or a reference to the funding field.
Yeah, so we could choose to do that, or we could choose to disallow what we have today and only require the funding field. But that's a debate we can deal with later. Any of those outcomes would achieve the same goal.
Okay, so we'll start working on that. I can open maybe a first cut at what that would, a first PR to add some language around that, and if you can help fill in what the reference would look like on the funding side, I think we can hopefully close that out.
Cool.
Yeah, with that change, I think we're ready to merge this as a draft, or as not a draft, right? As a final document, because it's draft now.
Yep.
And then the next step after that would be update the tool with the new, see, and this is where we'll have to look at what the tool does, because I think it's just a JSON schema validator effectively right now.
Yep.
Which, since this, I'm pretty sure the way I set it up is it's only validating what would be in the support key, not the whole package JSON. So if we're referencing outside, we'd probably need to change that a little bit. But
right, and that's where I mentioned we may also want a separate tool like that validates and normalizes the funding information. And if that tool existed, I could do my best to advocate for NPM itself using it so that we're using the same tool. Since that logic already exists in NPM, so you could probably just extract it. But and then we have kind of the beginnings of an ecosystem of tooling around this stuff, and single sources of truth and so on.
Now, the only other thing I'd like to throw in there is, like we talked about, putting it into the final versus drafts. Do we think, I'm wondering if it makes sense to say, okay, we merge in the change related to the funding field. Does it make sense to sort of then, talk about it, promote it as a, hey, give us your feedback, in parallel with working on the tools, as opposed to like, hey, here's the final version and the tools before we go out and ask for any broader input?
I mean, if our only two categories are draft and final, then that's a very interesting question. I feel like if we had like draft, candidate, and final, then this would be moving it from draft into candidate.
Right, and I guess it's still the same question though. Like,
yeah.
Even if we moved it into candidate, should we be going, before we start like updating all the tools, should we be trying to get some more feedback input?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should, but I think that the tooling is part of the way we do that.
Yeah, I think getting somebody to run a tool that generates it and then commits it to their repo is probably the most effective way to get feedback. Because if they just read it, I mean, I don't know. I've read this obviously many, many times now, and sometimes still I'm like, well, yeah, it looks generally good. I still haven't put it in a project other than that support package itself.
Okay.
I think the working with it will be the feedback we really want to see.
Yep. Okay. So broader. Okay. So I just wanted to get clarity on that, which I think it is basically we want some tooling before we go out for more feedback. So I'm just in the minutes reorganizing what we got. So basically our next steps are reference the funding proposal feeds, tweak to reference, tweak to reference the funding proposal fields, ideas to decouple the funding info from the support field, links will be referenced to the funding field. Then the step after that, or kind of in parallel, is update to the package validation tool to support current version, and then call for broader input, right? As our current next steps. Does that make sense to everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, so let me just, and unfortunately, I think that doesn't give too much time for the item that Bethany wanted to add. Do you want to maybe just plant the seed and we can talk about it top of the agenda next time?
Yeah, very briefly, there's been a few PRs raised about tooling for module maintainers to test across LTS versions, and some discussions around SitGym and whether we can leverage SitGym to do some work. And Andrew, who's on the call, has put a PR into SitGym that will pull down a module's dependency tree and test kind of the top level of the dependencies. So that PR is open in SitGym, but I think there needs to be a discussion on whether it's the right thing to do to add it to SitGym, or whether a standalone tool or even a tool that consumes SitGym should be made to cover some of the use cases, and the 3 issues are listed in the minutes. So that's the overview. I'll try and add some comments to point to the PR so people can take a look, and maybe we'll discuss it next time.
I think even one of the questions was like, should we try and, like, is it a big enough conversation that we should try and set up a separate meeting to cover that?
Yeah, potentially.
I don't know what people's thoughts are. Like, for the people here, are you interested in having that discussion? And do you think it's going to be long enough that we should try and just, set up a separate time, and as opposed to trying to squeeze it into one of the meetings?
I'm very interested in the discussion, and if our collab summit is any indication, it won't fit in one normal meeting. Right? I mean, we went off on the
Right.
tangent
Yep.
on this a little bit and took up most of that meeting. So
That's kind of what I think we were thinking. So if people are interested, maybe Bethany can try and set up another time for us to all get together.
Yep, I'll try to set up a doodle for it.
Sounds good. Maybe open an issue and put the doodle in there, and
Yep.
we'll get, because yeah, it seems like a very good topic for discussion, but I suspect we'll have a hard time containing it in the meetings themselves.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're at that. With that, we're at 4:01. Is there anything else that people want to talk about before we close out for today? If not, thanks for everybody taking the time. It was a really good discussion today, and look forward to talking to everybody next time.
Thanks, everyone.
thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.